going back to when you moved into being independent, what is that transition like?
It had been in my mind a little bit, and then I had an opportunity come up that I thought would be an okay opportunity. I said,
Aspire to have stuff on the charts, win a Stellar or win a Grammy. What does that feel like, you know what I mean, to finally achieve that?
it can't be the goal.
Yeah.
Right? Success can't be the goal,
Yeah.
and certainly not winning awards.
Most people that I talk about Dolby Atmos and spatial audio, they always say sucks, hate it,
Sure.
hate it, sounds terrible. They talk about all these things that they hate about it, and even some people on the consumer level.
How is a consumer going to hear this, right? No one's going to put up 11, 12 speakers in their living room. But every time I take a Atmos mix, I'm losing.
What up, guys? It's your boy, John Mike. We're back again with the Hangout Podcast. I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee, which is close to my hometown of Jackson, Tennessee. And I'm here with none other than the man, the myth, and the future legend, Jon Blass. Man, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for allowing me into this amazing space, which is Atmos spatial audio ready. You know, I think we're going to be getting into some of that on this and just talking about and just hanging out, man. But, man, welcome to the show, bro.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Man.
Glad to have you here with me. So,
Man,
yeah.
you know, we've been trying to connect and get some stuff for the community for a couple of years now. We won't dig into all of that minutia, but we're just going to hang out with Blass because that's what the Hangout is about. It's just hanging out, talking about his career, talking about what he's kind of into at the moment, what he's going to be getting into in the future, and just having some fun, and just maybe you guys will learn something. Maybe you guys will just enjoy being entertained by us pontificating about the things that we think we know about audio and mixing and producing and all of that good stuff like that, man. So, man, tell us, for those who just don't know, that might be watching, they don't know what Jon or who Jon Blass is. Who is Jon Blass, if you had to sum yourself up?
Well, professionally, I'm a mixing engineer. And that means I spend all my time right here listening to records and making them sound as good as I can. So, so I've been doing that for quite some time now.
About how many years?
I've been independent, should have done the math ahead of time, since 2014.
Okay. Getting close to a decade.
Yeah, getting close to a decade. Wow. And before that I was assistant for John Yosh, which I think we all know. So,
we all know John Yosh.
Yes.
If you don't know John Yosh, go to gospelproducers.com. He's plastered all over there.
Yes, deservedly so.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I worked with him for 5 years before branching out independently. And
I thought it was longer than that. I thought it was like 10 years. So it was 5 years.
5 years, yeah. 2010 through most of 2014. So
like 15 years pretty much all in terms of professionally being
professionally making music, and especially in gospel music. So,
wow. So that's who you are professionally, but who are you non-professionally?
Outside of this space, great question. I'm just a normal guy. I have a wife and a couple kids, and that pretty much occupies most of my time.
Wow.
Between them and the dog. So, which I made Lincoln go away for today. So, so he's not here. But
we see him on Instagram all the time.
Oh yes,
we just love seeing those dog pics.
He's always here with me. So yeah.
He's
someone keep you company in the mix.
Yeah, he gets to hear every record before it comes out, right? He's probably got the best ears in the business.
He doesn't care, but he hears them all.
So how did you get into mixing? That's probably like a good question to kind of dig into and start. Like, what was the drive? Where did you get your beginnings? How did you start? How did you get into wanting to be, what does that journey look like, basically? Listen, I hope you are enjoying this conversation with Jon Blass. I got something really quick that I want to show you, though. Check this out.
Hey, this is Jon Blass. You may have seen that I just announced my Gospel Producers mixing class. My intent here is to let you into my thought process, my insights, how and why I do what I do every day to create the best art that I possibly can for clients that I respect so much. I get to work with some really incredible artists, and this is how I think about mixing and music and art and how I get to the finish line with these records. Click the link in my bio or scan the QR code to gain access to this class.
Yeah, like a lot of people in music, it kind of started in the church for me.
Really?
I went to a small little church with, it wasn't like cool consoles and like a band and all that. We had a Mackie 24 channel, and I was in middle school, and I was like, that's cool. And
Really?
I thought it was neat, and so I ended up kind of getting trained at the church to run the sound system, and I just enjoyed it. So, it grew, and we started, we had a little band, and they had rehearsals, and I liked to do that. So I like to go and just play around with stuff and try to make it better. And that sort of turned into, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know, I like doing this, so let's pursue that. So I ended up pursuing a Bachelor of Music degree in recording technology.
Okay, where'd you go? End up going?
I got my associates first at Grand Rapids Community College in Michigan.
Okay, so you're in Michigan.
Yep, yeah, I grew up in Michigan.
Man, Michigan is just like where everybody comes out of in this industry. I got to go spend some time in Michigan. It's crazy.
Yes.
So Grand Rapids, that's
Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yeah, so other side of the state from Detroit, but I went to school there, and then I transferred to a little liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, where I got my bachelor's degree before moving here to try to actually
make a life.
Right.
So I think I understand now why I'm not, my career hasn't exploded into the most amazing thing in gospel, is because I didn't grow up in Michigan.
That's the key.
And then I didn't move to Nashville after I, grew up in Michigan, because that seems to be like the two common denominators of like you started. Because I think where's Aaron? Isn't Aaron from Michigan as well?
Aaron's from Michigan.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. He grew up near, on the east side of the state, which so did Yosh. Yeah. So did Randy Poole, which I know you know. Who else? Lucius Hoskins, who like produces like Zaccardi Cortez and plays guitar with Tank and like all kinds of stuff. He grew up in Grand Rapids. There's
all right. So I want to start over my life
from Michigan.
I want to press reset on my life. Go back to and tell God I want to put me in Michigan.
Yeah.
Just put me in Michigan, grow up there, and then move me to Nashville, and then my life would be so much better in that respect now. So grew up, you went to the Pennsylvania, moved to Nashville. How did this connection happen with like Yosh and all of that good stuff like that? How did that
when I was
that career?
When I was in school in Michigan, I did an internship for a summer at a church, a big church.
Okay.
With cool consoles and stuff. You know what I mean? Like a big
non-Mackie.
Right. They had a trio of Digico boards, and like they were broadcasting live, and they had events there, and like it was a big church.
Wow.
And so then later in my academic career, I was looking for another internship, and trying to figure out what to do. Cold calling studios is it's a tough game, really.
Wow.
Like, so I looked at the credits of one of the worship leaders' albums from that church, and I called him up, and I was like, "Hey, should I go like hang out at this studio? Like, what's your thoughts?" And he was like, "You need to go hang out with John Yosh, who had mixed his album." And so I called up John Yosh, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, come hang out." So, so I hung out with him for a summer, he and his assistant at the time, Grant.
Yeah.
I got to work on all kinds of cool, fun stuff. We did Kurt Carr that summer. We did a live recording with Hezekiah Walker. We did a single for Lettucey. We did, God, I don't even remember anymore. But like, it was a great summer, and I kept in touch. And when I moved back down here, my connections were mostly through Yosh. So I was hanging out with Yosh when I could. I was hanging out with Randy Poole when I could. I was hanging out in studios. I had an internship at East Iris Studios. So I was just kind of like doing whatever I could to stay in the game and selling clothes at the mall to pay my measly rent and like whatever you could do. And then Grant had decided to move on and do something unrelated to his work with Yosh, and
that's what I heard.
Yosh called me up, and I was just about to start a paid gig at a studio at East Iris.
Wow.
And he called me up and was like, "Hey, come work for me instead." And I was like, "Done." So
done and done.
So I started working with him, and assisted him and worked alongside him for years on a ton of records.
That's such an amazing connection. I know there's a lot of, bobs and weaves in there, because I know a lot of people think that like there's always, it's no straight line to success.
No.
It's a crooked road, always trying to get there, and it's turns and turns and
still on it.
rerouting of the GPS because you made a wrong turn, and it's got to get you back on track. And I know, so here's something that I thought of as you was talking, like working with John Yosh, to kind of segue into that, because I know that sounds like probably people listening and watching are like, yo, that's just like, that would be like the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit down and be an assistant to like a Yosh or what have you. And I know that sounds glamorous, and I'm pretty sure at a time it's probably exciting. I'm not taking away from the exciting of it.
Of course.
But what does that actually look like, interning for like a Yosh?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like, getting into that game, like at the beginning? Because kind of pushing aside, like I said, because I know it's not as glamorous or as it would sound. It's exciting.
Yeah.
But what were you doing?
What's the work?
Yeah. What's the work? What was those early years like?
Yeah. So my role as an assistant, primarily is to make things as smooth as possible for the mixer, right? Like I handled all the intake of files and all the output of deliverables. And that also included, especially as the years progressed and I learned more and more what he wants and what's going to work for him and what's going to slow him down, like get rid of those things before it gets to him. So I would intake the files, I'd open up the session. A lot of that's just, set up, like make sure everything's the right colors and the right layout, and like a template is imported and all that kind of stuff. Cleaning up vocals, cleaning up background vocals, bouncing down vocals. If we get a huge bunch of background vocals, like he doesn't need all that. So, when he would get a session, then we have sopranos, altos, and tenors. He doesn't have to look at how many and how they were recorded and like all that kind of stuff. Like, give me something that's A, usable, and B, that's like cleaned up and balanced and even, and like, he's not getting a bounce of sopranos from me that has one girl sticking out on the right side, right? Like, so you got to kind of go through and clean all that up and fix it and make it the least amount of friction as possible, so that he can be creative and not be fixing issues. So you allow him to mix and not fix. You're the fixer. That's the goal. Yeah. Obviously, he's once you get into things, there's more things to fix. Sometimes he'd pass it back off to me. Sometimes he fixes it himself. Like, he's an incredibly talented engineer. He doesn't offload things because he can't do it. He offloads things because it keeps you in a creative space.
Exactly.
It's helpful. It keeps you in the flow. It keeps you moving. Yeah. So
that's important.
He doesn't need to think about that stuff. He didn't need to think about hard drive management. He didn't need to think about where things were. And what he was going to do that day. He, obviously we talked about the schedule. It's not like I managed his schedule, but like when he got into the studio, he'd have something to work on, so that he could open it up and it would be familiar and be ready to roll. If he wanted to kick a sample of a kick drum, he had it there. Yeah. If he wanted a completely different take on a kick drum, okay, well, sampling the sample is a lot faster and easier than sampling the live one. So he can always sample off a sample that I already fixed. Toms are cleaned up. There's no plosives and lip smacks and all that kind of stuff. So, and as you progress, you kind of know, okay, well, I'll get him started with this and get him started with this. And the less he has to be like, oh, let me put that same EQ I put on this thing every single time, the better, right? So. So that kind of growth, and
that's amazing, man. To hear that that aspect of engineering that I think people don't talk about a lot, because you're just getting into having an assistant and your own mix assistant, and you're following that same track. And I think that's the thing that people don't think about or don't talk about, the importance of having a mix assistant. So like you can say, you can stay in the flow state And not only that, the volume of work that is probably coming in, because I can only imagine. I mean, Yosh has, like, looking at his career, 50 years almost in gospel. I mean, he's been the go-to guy for decades. Yeah. And especially when you were coming into that space, he was probably like top tier at that point.
Oh, for sure.
And so I can only imagine the bandwidth of work that you guys had coming in on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And so if you got that level of work coming in, you know, which I'm sure like you're experiencing now. I know we talked about that a little bit. Like you got like just buttloads of work just lined up, you know, for months out, booked already. So, you know what I mean? We take for granted, I think a lot of guys that are getting into mixing and, you know, or even intermediate in their career or somewhere on that journey, they don't realize the importance of having an assistant. So can you now getting into that, getting out of Yosh's role, you know, being an assistant as Yosh, and now being the engineer and the head engineer, and you got a mix assistant. Can you kind of speak to that, the importance of that, and how that, as an engineer, like how important that is and what that looks like?
Sure. It's still something I'm working on and trying to figure out how it works for me and how
how does the assistant have an assistant now? Like how do you how do you transition from being that, you know, because I'm pretty sure you were independent for a while and then just you finally hired an assistant. How do you let go of the reins?
Yeah, well, and the way I structured is a little different than my arrangement with Yosh. I don't have Jesse in here with me all day, every day. He has other work outside of me as well. We do a lot of work remotely. He comes in a lot when I'm not here. And also I want to be spending time with him and helping grow the process. And so there's some, you know, there's some learning experience for me. It's not, I'm not following a pattern exactly. I'm trying to figure out how do I do this in a way that fits my situation and how I work and how I'm handling this, and learning from my experience with Yosh and learning from, you know, my experience of doing it without an assistant and, you know, all of that stuff. Like how do we make this the best it can be? And so, that's a process we're still in, but Jesse is a phenomenal assistant. He's easy to work with. He handles things really well and efficiently. And when I open up a session, I know it's ready for me. And when I'm done with a mix and it's approved, I don't think about it anymore. I flip it over to this one's approved, and he comes in and prints the deliverables and sends them. And then
you're on to the next thing.
And I'm on the next thing. Yeah. So where's my time best spent? It's not spent in printing stems, it's spent in mixing. So if he can come in the evening and print stems, great. And we automate a lot of that too. So he doesn't, you know, I mean, he was here the other night and set it all up to print and then left. And when I got back in the morning, it was still printing. So that's a lot of time that thankfully we're saving. And you know, we're constantly trying to streamline how we do that and how we set up sessions to make that easier, better, faster, to better care for the clients. So it only serves the artists and the producers better if we can get them the deliverables faster, and if we can get their work on the calendar by their deadline.
Deadline.
I hate saying no to people. Not because I don't like, I need the work. Like I hate saying no to people because I want to do the work. I hear these,
you get to
you know, they send me a rough mix. I'm like, yes, I want to do this. They're like, deadline's next week. And I'm like, like, what can I do to make this happen? I hate that. So so the goal is to serve the most amount of people that I can.
As efficiently as possible.
As efficiently as possible.
I think that's amazing, man. So going back to when you moved into being independent, you know, from Yosh, 4 to 5 years or however long it was working with him, at what point do you make that transition? How do you make that transition? What is that transition like?
There's no easy answer, honestly. Okay. There's no easy answer for that one.
Like, how did you know you were ready for that?
Didn't. That was a tough gig to leave. Yosh was an incredible boss, first of all. Second of all, I got to work on the top gospel albums, like all of them. And those producers and those artists knew me and would call me when they needed stuff. Like not to mix, but they'd be like, yo, I need this TV track. They don't call Yosh for that, they call me. Like, because they knew I was the one who's gonna like make sure they had it, and I know where it is, and otherwise Yosh would just have to text me about it. So, you know, that's, who wants to give that up, right? It's not the golden handcuff kind of thing, right? Like, it's like, this is a great job. Yeah. And also being an assistant is never the goal. Yeah. I wanted to sit in the hot seat, right? And so how do you know when it's time? I don't know. I don't know. It had been in my mind a little bit, and then I had an opportunity come up that I thought would be an okay opportunity, and would also it would make it impossible for me to continue in my current role. Yeah. And so I said, now's the time to jump. Yeah. And that did not go smoothly, but like, I mean, with Yosh it did. that was fine. Leaving Yosh was honestly, we had an intern a little bit earlier named Adam, who is that's what I was about to say, Adam. Phenomenal. Like the best person possible to step into that role, and he did so perfectly and seamlessly. And I thought I would be getting all kinds of calls from Yosh, like, how do I do this? Where is this? And it was like flipping the switch. Nothing. Adam had it under control. So, you know, he came in for a few months. We like transitioned over, and I made sure he was up to speed on everything and all that. But then I made the leap, and then the gig I left it for fell through, and then I floundered for a while, and thankfully ended up with some really great opportunities, and really remarkably quickly had some really good clients, thankfully. Wow. So
Wow. So leaving from that for a gig, and then that gig falls through, but then you said you kind of floundered for. What was that process of floundering like? What was that? You know, finding your way, so to speak.
It's a tricky thing, because I don't. What do you do? How do you find work? How do you generate work? I still don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. And I also was very. I don't know how to say this exactly, but I didn't want to call the people I know in the business, because those are Yosh's clients. Right. And I absolutely did not want to step on any toes, and I did not want to, and especially because we share a first name. Like, I was like, I am not signing any emails with my first name. Like, I don't want any confusion about who's who. And like some of the people that ended up calling me, I don't even know why they called me or how they called me. But ended up working on some really great records that year. But I tried to use my time wisely, you know, setting things up for success later, making sure I had the structure that I needed in terms of file management, and in terms of like, how am I going to, you know, should I create a PDF that says, here's how you should send me files? Should I create a PDF that says, here's what you're getting when we're done? Like, you know, that kind of thing. Just making sure the infrastructure was as ready as it could be. Yeah. And then just going, man, if I could just get a couple songs.
I know you know what I mean? Gosh.
So, but eventually it came, and like that next year I mixed what were the records? Todd Dulaney, Jonathan Nelson, like both of the big records that year. Shirley Caesar was that year. I had two nominated albums in the Grammys that year. Like, I think that was the Grammys 2016, so the following year. But
that's a pretty.
Quick.
I know it probably, but I know it when you going through it probably felt longer.
Oh yeah.
When it did.
In hindsight, I'm like, wow, was it really that quick? Yeah. And also,
but in process, it felt like, gosh, is this ever going to happen? Do I need to? You probably had Yosh on speed dial, like, what if I can get my job back? I wonder if he'll take me back. I know I quit, but will he take me back?
It's tough to be completely independent.
Yeah.
But I've been completely independent since, and thankfully, just really thankful for some really good clients that keep sending me records that I'm like, how? Thank you. This is amazing. So
that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal way to kind of push in. So moving into kind of you know, because talking about past and then there's present. You've been you know, over this last year, you've last 10 years almost, you've been scaling this thing out. Bigger and bigger each year, nominations. I mean, like you said, working on some iconic records. And then I look over there, I'll do some B-roll over. You actually got the Grammy finally Because I think when we came last time, you were, I was like, hey, I'm trying to get there. So let's talk about that process of like, what was that? What was the Grammy nominated or no Grammy-winning award winning? Because now you can say I'm a Grammy Award winning engineer. What was that record that finally got that award for you?
Yeah, it was the Fisk Jubilee Singers, which is it's a HBCU here in Nashville, Fisk University. And the Jubilee Singers have it was their 100th anniversary album. Yeah. So like they've been around forever, basically. And like an iconic group that they are credited with getting the name Music City for Nashville.
Wow.
Because of their influence and the amount of traveling they did in the, early 1900s, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were a pivotal group, a gospel singing group.
Yeah.
So, and they still are.
Yeah.
And they did a 100th anniversary album recorded live at the Ryman here in Nashville.
And you got a chance to. So when you were getting it, did you have the inkling that this would be the one?
Oh, no.
Because I'm pretty sure there's plenty of the ones, the almost theirs.
Yeah.
Where you're like, we almost got it.
Sure.
So what is that process like? Because I know a lot of us in the mix world aspire that. We aspire to have stuff on the charts, have stuff on the, win a Stellar or win a Grammy is like, in our field is like the top of the creme de la creme, and Yosh has a whole bookshelf full of them that he just, it's just like, it's just another Grammy, he just throws it up there, It's just like, so another Stellar, I don't even know if I've ever seen him post about the Stellar stuff that he gets. It's just like, we won another Stellar this year, cool, but Grammys and all those things like that. What is that process? What is that feel like, to finally achieve that, in the long process? What were those almost that you thought you got your hopes up and it fell down, and then to finally win it, with this, probably what you said, it was unexpected record. What is that? Kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of hope, no matter how little hope you actually have of them actually winning. When you have something nominated, you're like, but there's a chance, right?
There's a chance.
And yeah, it's an emotional thing. It's really exciting to be in that category.
Yeah.
And to have a shot at winning a Grammy, it's really fun to do it with people that you love and like, and enjoy working with and have for a long time. I went to the Grammys a couple years ago, for a Gene Moore nomination, because I loved working on that album. It was like, all the producers are going. It was, and they're buddies of mine, like Terrence and Dana and like who else was on that said, and like great people involved on this, and like they were all going. I was like, I want to go.
Yeah.
Like that's the only time I've gone. Okay. And it's really, it was about the people and the hang and it's exciting. And we lost, of course, like it happens. It's hard to win a Grammy. It's supposed to be hard to win a Grammy. It's,
that's good.
That's good. Big
stuff.
honors don't come easily.
Wow.
So
that's good.
It's, I try not to put too much stock in it. It's great to be involved. I care a lot more about what the Recording Academy does outside of their award show.
That's true.
And I try to stay involved in that because that matters to me. So yeah, I love seeing the artists that I work on get nominated, win awards, be on the charts. Like the success it's really fun to see because they put their heart and soul into it. I spent a day or two on a mix, and they spent a lot longer than that writing the song and producing it and making hard decisions and killing their babies and finding the one that they thought this is it, and then to see it succeed is extremely rewarding for them. So yeah. So I'm honored to be a part of it, and I love getting to work on things that resonate with people.
Definitely.
And that's part of why I like what I do, is because I like to help things translate to resonate with people. But yeah, winning is fun.
Winning is fun. We do want to win.
Sure,
but the heart behind it is what I love hearing is, and the humility of it, you know what I mean? And to see that you do it because you love it. and that translates across everything that you're doing, from how you're interacting with your artists and your clients, how you're sending them files, how all of that communication, even, you know, celebrating with them through the win, celebrating through them through the almost and the loss, and keeping that positive attitude. Because if you're doing it, if that's the end game, oh, I want to win a Grammy, and that's all you're focused on,
that can't
then
be.
You lose.
It can't be the goal. Right? Success can't be the goal.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
And certainly not winning awards, because you have no control over that. Like, no control over that. Even charting is not the goal. Yeah. That's a goal for your radio programmer, maybe, but that's not the goal for you. Be the goal for right. You. Like, that's the goal, is to create something that that evokes an emotion, that translates a heart, that, like, this is art, right? Like, so whatever, yes, there's a business side to this, but the business side has to come out of true emotion. Yeah. They're not, this is a weird business where we're marketing art, but, like, you can't market stuff that doesn't resonate very well.
That's true.
So once you have something that actually, I don't know, speaks to a listener, then the radio programmer has a job. Then the marketing team has a job. Before that, they're just calling people begging. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So that is what, you know, seeing something on a chart means to me, is like someone is getting something out of this art that someone made, and that's the whole goal. Man. That's the whole goal.
Good. That's so good, man. So since winning the Grammy, I'll ask this question, even though that's not the goal, but just as a general question, since winning that, how was that from the business side of the thing? How's that increased? Has that ramped up your business, or is it just really pretty much the same?
I don't know that it's ramped anything up. I mean, it's nice to from a standpoint of, like, you're trying to market yourself. Being able to say you're Grammy Award winning is nice. And, you know, Grammy Award losing doesn't have the same ring to it, but
no, it does.
But also, like, okay, nothing changes, right?
Wow.
Nothing changes. It's not like it comes with a big old check or something. It's like it's a nice decoration.
It's a notch on the belt.
Yeah.
It's a nice decoration.
Yeah. And not to knock the Grammys, it's a huge honor.
I
don't, and also,
but I hear what you're saying.
It's not, this isn't a game changer. Yeah. It's a great recognition of a good album, and that's it. So yeah, I keep it in perspective. It was a huge honor to win it. My buddy Shannon Sanders produced that whole album and put the whole thing together, and was in here all the time with me working on it, and, like, you know, I love that guy so much. And working with him is amazing, and to win with him is amazing. So, but yeah,
I love it.
It's a Grammy.
It's a Grammy.
Yeah.
I love it, man. And it's just so encouraging to hear, you know, your see your journey, hear your journey, and hear your heart behind it all is the most amazing part. So past, present, awards, all of that. So now I want to kind of segue and talk about future stuff, which primarily what I want to dig into is the Atmos stuff that, you know, you're kind of getting into. And as far as I know Duncan has done some 5.1 stuff, but as far as I know, like right now, like you seem to be really killing the game, or at least getting into the game really heavy with the Dolby Atmos spatial audio stuff. What was the draw towards moving into that direction?
Belief in the format, honestly.
Interesting.
Yeah. I started putting this room together before Apple announced spatial audio.
Really?
Because I was intrigued enough about the tech and about what I thought the future of music was going to be, that I said, I think this is something I need to get on early. And the room took a little longer to put together than I planned. But now that it's all together, I mean, geez, that once Apple announced spatial audio, that sort of blew things up a bit.
Wow.
And it's only getting more. Like, more and more people need Atmos mixes. So first of all, to put myself in a position where I can take care of my clients, if they need Atmos mixes, I can do that. And that's, you know, again, we're serving the client. So that's the ultimate goal. Secondly, I do believe in the future. Yeah. And I 100% do believe and a lot of people don't like this thought, but I do think that in a few years we won't be mixing in stereo anymore. Wow. We'll be mixing in Atmos, and if we need a stereo mix, that'll be the fold down from Atmos. So, yeah, I know people are already working towards that. Yeah. I have so far been doing Atmos mixes based on stereo mixes, which is the standard way to do it at the moment. But that's evolving because it's expensive and time consuming to do 2 mixes of every song. Definitely. So, yes, right now I'm mostly working in mixing in stereo, and then if we also need an Atmos mix, I then mix it in Atmos after the stereo mix is approved. And that's sort of the way it is right now. But this is evolving so fast that things are changing constantly, and I definitely don't think we'll be doing that in a few years. So
I agree with you. I initially. We have a Hangout podcast where me and my guy Dale Tabor, amazing engineer, he mixes and he does mix for film. So he's been mixing in 7.1 for years, but he's more on the film side of things. But we were talking about this very thing, and I wasn't at that point. This shows how much my brain would change and mine would change on things in the space of 6 months. When I was like, no, I think it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick. It's going away.
Sure.
It's just whatever. I don't see it. Yeah. I hate Atmos mixes. When I figure out a song is in Spatial and I accidentally left my AirPods on Spatial, I turned it off.
Sure.
I hate Spatial. I was so almost against it. This is going away. But something shifted me in that direction, in the other direction. The holidays came and my kids wanted an Oculus. And so we bought the Oculus. I bought the Oculus for them. I came home, and I know people, if you're bored, skip through this part because I know I've told this story probably 3 or 4 times already. But I'm gonna tell it again. I'm just gonna tell it again for you guys. The wife said, "Why don't you set it up, now?" Because it's 2 weeks before Christmas. Set it up now so that way.
Yes.
When Christmas comes, they don't have to, you don't have to break away because they're going to be excited when they see it. They're going to want to play it. So you go ahead and set it up now, put it back in the box, and then we can wrap it. So that way, Christmas morning, everybody can just pull it out and they can just enjoy it.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm down in my studio and I just kind of put this thing on and I'm setting it up and all of this awkward stuff that goes along with it. And it finally gets through all of the welcome screens and all of that stuff like that. And I get to this thing and it just whoosh. And I'm just like, whoa. So I clicked around with a few things, played around with a few things. And then I took it off, went back to Best Buy and bought 2 more. Because one for me, one for the kids, one for the wife, because she's enjoying it, and one for me because I don't like to share. Mm-hmm. And so, because I saw it then, it finally started to click and I started to understand why Facebook, Meta now is investing billions of dollars into the virtual reality and these immersive experiences. And they just bought a few, I can't think of the names right now, but they bought a few audio plug-in companies and stuff. They're really getting into the minutia on trying to make sure that they get this right. And then Apple has been doing the spatial audio thing for years, but they're ramping it up and they're working on their own virtual reality headset, as well, or AR or what have you. They're going to do it, but it's all connected. And so the dots finally started to connect to me. If these companies are putting billions of dollars into this, and then they even with Logic dropped in spatial audio, as a form, you can actually mix and produce in spatial audio in Logic now. It's a part of the thing. So I'm like, okay. And then I've been hearing announcements. I think Mercedes is this year sometime is gonna release a car that has Atmos in it. And so all the other formats, everything's starting to point to where it's going. And so I finally saw it. I think that's where, like you said, where we're going. We're eventually gonna get to immersive audio is going to be a thing, with headsets and all of that. And so I don't know if that's what you saw earlier, or if it's starting to evolve into that for you or not.
Yeah, I've never actually done much with VR. I got to experience it once, and I was blown away. But honestly, that didn't translate to music to me.
Yeah. So how do you think it translates to music?
Well,
or why do you think?
Well, I don't think it doesn't translate, but it didn't to me. In the moment, I was like, oh wow, this is where music's going. It was just, this is fun. You know what I mean? Like, is a little jarring. I don't know what. I think it was just a couple of years of little things here and there that I wrote off, and then eventually, I don't remember what the impetus was, but I was like, I think this is actually something I need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so I started watching a bunch of webinars on Dolby Atmos, and like, and then started putting a room together and discussing how to do all that, and ended up putting it together, and I think I believe in it because it's completely new. Yeah. This is, I think a lot of people try to say, oh, this is just another quadraphonic sound. This is another surround sound. This is another SACD.
Yeah,
and it's not.
I remember SACDs.
It's a completely new concept in music. Yeah. Atmos has been around for over a decade.
Facts,
in film.
In film.
But in music, it's really relatively new.
No, it's brand new.
So so we're there's a lot of things that we're still figuring out, and still there's a lot of things that are too hard to do right now that are getting easier. Yeah. The fact that Logic has introduced the renderer natively into Logic is huge. At no additional cost in Logic, you can start working on it. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. And they obviously are the ones that are dominant in the Dolby Atmos space because of their spatial audio thing. Right. So they have incentive to
they're gonna
get
follow
it out.
Suit.
Right, exactly. And it's already on Amazon. It's already on, I think, everywhere but Spotify.
They're coming.
And Spotify this week showed a picture of their Atmos room. They have an Atmos studio that they built. So it's coming. And the thing is, like, I think people are scared away by the consumer. How is the consumer going to hear this, right? No one's going to put up 11, 12 speakers in their living room, but you don't have to. No. And that's the beauty of Atmos to me, is that with your sound bar you probably already have to watch movies with, it's probably Atmos enabled already. The Sonos one, the Sennheiser one, like those are Atmos enabled already, and you can extend those if you want to put the little Sonos ones behind you. It can help, and they sound really incredible. Yeah. A few years ago, I went to a producers and engineers wing event, and they had a Sennheiser Ambio soundbar set up. These are very expensive soundbars, but pretty incredible. And they had it in a room along with a full Genelec speaker setup for Atmos. And they flipped back and forth, and I was like, how? That does not make any sense to me. And at that point, to me, it was still a gimmick. And and in hindsight, I'm like, I was so dumb. Right. And I'm still in it pretty early, and also back then, I didn't think anything of it. Because I also viewed it as well, I don't do surround sound. I don't do that. But it's changed. So now, as we're evolving this, it's going to be, you have one file. Yeah. You have one mix, and it's a spatial audio. It's an immersive mix, right? Yeah. And if you play it back on your AirPods, you hear the spatial audio version or the binaural version, depending on what format you're on. If you play it on your Amazon Echo, you'll hear it. Right now, it's the Echo Studio has it, not the regular cheaper Echo. If you play it on your HomePod, you'll hear it. If you play it in your car, you'll hear it. And if you don't have one that's enabled, you hear it in stereo. Yeah. Right? So one file that does the math to figure out what it has to do to play it in the best way possible based on your setup. What could be better than that, right? So I think that's, I think it's going to
grow into that.
Yes.
I agree.
It's already getting there. So yes, I think it's definitely going to grow into that. And like you said, the luxury cars are already coming out with Atmos. Yeah,
and that usually trickles down to eventually the consumer.
It'll be in the Corolla pretty soon. You know what I mean? That's how things work, right? Yeah. Dolby outfitted a couple of cars with Atmos, and I got to sit in one of those, and it's an incredible experience. It was really fun. Wow. Really fun. They had a couple of those, the bigger Teslas, and that they retrofitted, and they're experimenting and learning and showing off, and they sound incredible. It was really fun to sit in there and listen. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that future. And I think the more people get used to it and the more they're hearing it without even knowing.
Exactly.
When they hear something in stereo, they're going to be like, why does that sound weird? Why does that sound so small?
Yeah.
So I do think there's a huge learning curve to making it sound as good as stereo.
Yeah.
And also we're there.
Yeah. I think we're going to get used to it. I think it's just like any other new technology that hits the scene. Eventually it proliferates throughout that. And even if our generation or the previous generations don't tap into the full measure of it, it's the next generation. Like our kids are growing up and they don't know anything besides a touchscreen. You know what I mean? At this point, they're babies. They're coming out at 3 and 4 months and they're being introduced to touchscreens. So that's all they know for is consuming content or consuming data or information is all on a screen. It's all touch. Like we grew up with mouse and keyboards, and that was our inner and a screen in front of us that was non-touchable, and that's our format. And so the same thing with people with listening to stereo mixes. Most people that I talk to or engineers that I talk to, and we talk about Dolby Atmos and spatial audio, they always say it sucks, hate it, hate it, sounds terrible. 18 LUFS, it's not loud enough, blah, 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 blah. They talk about all these things that they hate about it. And even some people on the consumer level are at the same space. They don't hate, but we've been used to left, right for forever, the dawn of time when we were given ears. Yes. We've been used to left, right. And now, but that's not how the human ear works. It's 360. Of the way we even hear things. And so, but when consuming content, we've been used to just left, right. And now you introduce these other things into people who have been used to stereo, it sounds weird and they're still getting used to it. But this next generation or these next 5 to 10 years are really going to, I think, like you said, proliferate that throughout.
There's also, and I'm never going to knock people who are like, I don't like it. It doesn't sound as good. Or it's too quiet. Sure. Yeah. 100%, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're wrong. Like, no, okay, that's fine. I get that. Yeah. And also, there's a lot that goes into those things.
I can only imagine.
It doesn't sound good. Ever?
Yeah.
Or just like, there's a lot of different ways to create an Atmos mix. Yeah. And depending on what source files you have and what your experience is, and like, okay, are you just adding reverb? No one likes that. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Do you have control over more than just a few stereo stems? You can do some really cool things and you can make it really great. And also we're learning new techniques and trying to figure out how to make this translate in headphones and how to make it translate not just in the binaural rendering from Dolby, but also in spatial audio, which is a whole other beast.
Wow.
So there's a lot that goes into that. And yes, some of it's getting used to it. And I think some of it's really legitimate concerns about the sonic integrity and about how it sounds and how it's being mixed. And like, are people, there's a lot of need right now to get a lot of things Atmos. And Atmos. Okay, so we're just paying some kid to like, just do the thing. Like no one's QCing it, no one's listening to it, no one's saying, actually don't like that. Like they're just like, okay, is that the thing? I don't even know how to listen to it. Okay, cool, put it up. Like, okay, so there's a lot of variables and a lot of issues, and also the math is getting better, right? Yeah. Like Apple's spatial audio sounds better today than it did on launch day.
Oh, definitely.
So
they're improving it.
Yeah, this is the worst it's ever going to be. And it was worse a year ago, and it'll be better in a year. So we're constantly, they have a lot of smart people doing a lot of smart math over there that are trying to make this sound good. Yeah. So they care.
I think you're totally right about that, and that's what we're going to do. So thinking in that standpoint and bringing it home, a couple of questions that kind of popped to mind. What are the differences first? Let's see what that is. The differences between just Dolby Atmos, a Dolby Atmos mix versus a spatial audio mix. Because you said that they're two kind of different beasts, so to speak.
Yeah.
How are they different, and also how are they the same?
Yeah.
For those who don't know.
So spatial audio is Apple's proprietary spatialization techniques. That's their thing. They use Dolby Atmos master mixes
Okay.
to do that. So what they accept is a Dolby ADM file, which is the Dolby, that's the master file, right? And they take that. That's what can get translated to speakers. They put that through their thing, and they call that spatial audio. That's their brand of Dolby Atmos mixes.
Yeah. So
currently, that's the only immersive format they take.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that'll change or not, but currently they take Dolby Atmos. When you look at your Apple Music app while you're playing it, it says Dolby Atmos on it. It has that logo, but it's through their spatialization app. Dolby, so it's a speaker format, right? Atmos is a speaker format, but they also have a binaural rendering, which we have settings while we're mixing to make things sound farther, closer. We can change that kind of stuff. That doesn't go into the master file that is submitted to Apple. So they're doing their own thing independent of the binaural rendering. They're using the speaker file basically for Apple spatialization, and that's to create the ability for them to play the same thing on the HomePod and on whatever else they're playing. They have their own reasons, and everyone's gonna yell and argue and be upset about it, and it has upsides and downsides, just like anything. So just like the -18 LUFS requirement, like that's there are real legitimate reasons for that, and we have to abide by that, because if you're going to take this massive file with all these outputs and say, actually we have to play it through one speaker because it's going through this mono, smart speaker. Okay, well you need headroom then, because all that stuff has to get folded in and interpreted to be how loud coming out of the speaker. And okay, so then you need headroom because it's gonna go over -18 at that point. And you have to make sure you're within spec for these hardware devices. So Dolby works with all that stuff for anything Atmos enabled.
Wow. Yeah. So it's like you said, it's Dolby, it's the Atmos thing folding into the spatial audio setup for the most part.
Yeah. That's what spatial audio is.
It starts with that, and then it folds in, and then Apple's interpretation of that is that.
It's wildly different than the binaural. I can only imagine.
So what does that translation look like? Like, you're mixing in Dolby, and then you're submitting it in, through Apple, and it gets submitted in. And so when you found yourself like, man, when you're listening back to a spatial audio mix that you did, what has that process been looking like for you?
I don't wait that long to hear it. Since the process used to be you had to print a mix, export it as MP4, send it to yourself, save it to your phone, it has to be literally on your phone, and then play it back on AirPod Pros or Maxes or whatever, and then you can hear that'll be played back in spatial audio.
That's what it'll sound like. Gotcha.
Now, since Logic introduced real-time spatial audio monitoring, I have it set up. I'm routing a re-render from the Atmos renderer back into Logic, so I can in real time listen to the speakers, the binaural, and the Apple Spatial. So I'm constantly referencing, and I'm constantly, if I'm going to put something in the height channel, it's like, oh, how's that going to translate in spatial? I can just listen in real time. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pivotal. It makes life so much better, honestly. So
definitely.
So I know what it's going to sound like before it goes on Apple.
That was what I was wondering. I was wondering if there was any difference in that, when you just all of a sudden you're like, oh, you did just spend all this time putting this Dolby Atmos thing together, and you send it, then months later or whatever, you're like, oh, the mix came out. You pop it in, and you're like, oh, this sounds terrible.
Right.
Jesus, what happened?
Yeah.
Because I've heard those horror stories with mix, just regular stereo mixes. I can imagine what happens on the Dolby side.
Right. Yeah, you can't wait that long. You gotta hear it how the consumer is gonna hear it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So speaking to that, because I know this builds us into where we are with your setup itself. Like, what has that process been trying to build out? I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, but that process of trying to build out an Atmos room, I want to give a realistic picture to our audience of what the time involved, the experimentation, and especially the cost of it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because those are things because I know people, say, oh, I'm just going to throw up all these speakers in all my room, and you're just going to start, stamp of approval. I do Dolby Atmos mixes now, but you got certified through AVID. right, through the AVID program that they have. You did so. Talk about that. Like, what is that process in totality up to this point, Ben?
Sure. So the room, like, that process is a little bit different than like the AVID certification process. The AVID thing was really just a tool for me to implement learning the tech, right? Like, that's not, it wasn't about being creative. It was about, like, how do you make this stuff work? And how do you avoid the problems? And there was a lot of things in there about film that, like, I had no idea about because I don't do film. But you know, so that was just all that info is available for free. Like, you can get it. I paid for the course because I needed a structured, dedicated time for myself.
Outline.
But but you can. I mean, Dolby provides everything you need to know to do this for free. Wow. So it's all available.
But do you suggest that as an engineer that, you know, you go pay that?
No, it depends on your learning style, on your schedule, on your, like, you know what I mean? Like, it depends. If you're like, actually, I love, like, spending all my evenings just reading and trying things out, and I have that kind of time, then great. And for me personally, it was like, I actually, it's going to make me more comfortable and make me more confident if I like pass a test or something. So I did.
And then you can actually put that on there, like, hey, I passed the test. You know, like, I'm Dolby Atmos certified.
Especially at the beginning, people are like, you know, even labels don't know what it is yet, and they're like, oh, are you certified? Because they know, the only thing they know is that, like, oh, when we need Atmos, like, the label above us, like, hey, they have a certified engineer that does it. So are you certified? So, you know, people aren't asking me that much anymore, but, like, you know, it helps.
It helps.
Sure. Yeah. And that was part of what went into me making that decision, for sure.
So how much did it cost and how long did it take to do that?
That class?
Yeah,
I think it's like $1,500. Okay. And I think, like, the course is like 3 attended days during a week. That's like, it was bad. Like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing. Oh, wow. We're on Zoom. And then, you know, you have to do the coursework ahead of time or whatever. So I don't know, probably 60 hours total, maybe. I don't know. I didn't count. I just didn't.
I thought it was more like a semester or something like that. So it's literally like kind of like a 3-day crash course. Here's a test.
Yeah. Yep.
Certified.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to pass the test.
$1,500.
$1,500, yeah. But you know, so then you get some experience of, like, setting up I/O in Pro Tools and getting it to talk to the renderer, and you learn some things that will avoid mistakes. And so, like, okay, cool. You know, when I run into issues now, a lot of things, because this is new technology, are hard to find answers on. There's not a ton of forums. There's not a ton of people doing it, running into problems. So, so it was nice to have some of that. I also have a lot of friends now that are doing it, and we have a bit of a community of, like, people I can call and ask questions and, like, you know, run into an issue and, you know, hey, can you listen to this, or can I come by your studio and listen to in your Atmos rig, whatever. Like, all that stuff is more available now than it was a year ago. But yeah, so that was sort of
the process.
But even now, like, when I need to look something up, I can also go to the, you know, learning.dolby.com, I think is where the info is. And
just,
you know,
do some
and be like,
some
oh,
deep
let me double check something or whatever it is. Like, why is this not working? And but for the most part, like, I know where the windows are, and I know how things are routed and how things are working, and, like, I know how to fix it.
I love it.
So
that's what we do.
Doesn't mean there's not frustration still, but I know how to fix it.
So as you learn it, so that's the learning part of it.
Yeah.
But
well, that's the technical learning
part of it. But you still have to actually get your room set up for that. Actually figure out where you're placing speakers, figure out what your room acoustics, crosstalk. I know there's, like, just a little bit of research that I've done on it, that there's, like, even speaker latency, like,
that's one of the biggest things.
You know, because it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speaker here, speaker there, and then just press a button and it all works.
Right.
You know, you have to have different input latency, so to speak, or output latency, and you have to have an interface that's capable of pushing that many speakers. And so what does that part of the process look like?
Yeah, and again, this is getting easier as we talk. Like, when I first started, I went down all kinds of rabbit holes of how much money and how intense this needed to be and how to make this all happen, right? Even mounting ceilings to the speaker. surprisingly difficult challenge. And it's when they need to be precisely located.
Right.
Okay, that's a trick.
Yeah.
And it caused me a lot of stress. I eventually ended up hiring someone to do the install.
Hire somebody.
Which that was expensive.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
But you can. The nice thing is that, again, Dolby provides a ton of resources. If you're putting an Atmos room together, step one is email them. Find their form on there's like an onboarding process.
Okay.
And they will help guide you in where your speakers go and what speakers to use and how many subwoofers you need. And you know what I mean? Like I emailed them and I said, hey, I use these speakers. Like this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And these are my room dimensions, and
they just
I don't know, maybe some pictures or something, but they have a whole process of like, okay, well, you have to meet these loudness targets at this location, and like, these ones won't work, but these ones will, and we recommend you have this many subs because we can use this one for, LFE channel and these for bass management. There's a ton that goes into it, and also they're like, here's you go. How do you feel about this plan? And if you're like, actually, I can't do this because of this, they'll modify it or whatever. Yeah. So I, in my process, I revised which speakers I was using, and I changed the number of subs I was using. And, we had to make some changes. And also they work with you on that. So yeah, if you got a protractor and maybe some lasers and like some good know-how, put it in yourself. You can, especially if you're like, I cannot afford to spend the money on an install right now. Okay, if you want to do this and get started, start somewhere. You can always change it. I have changes I want to make to my room too. Like there's always changes. There's always revisions. But yes, in terms of like setting it up, like yes, you need an interface that can handle speaker latency and room correction. Right. So
what would you suggest in terms of that? Like
what I chose was the Avid Matrix Studio, which is a significantly cheaper, smaller version of the Matrix. And it has the SPQ card, a slightly smaller version of the SPQ card built right in. The SPQ card handles room tuning and delays, things like that. So you can have, I think it's up to 250 EQ filters. Which for this many speakers is like, yeah, you can do it. Might want more if we add more speakers, but like, that box is built for a room like this. So
you can't do this with Focusrite.
You can, absolutely.
Like the 2-channel.
Not the 2-channel, no. But no,
Scarlet.
Focusrite was the other option I was really strongly considering weighing.
I've seen they're big end, top end ones.
Basically you need enough outputs to hit this many speakers. And the biggest reason I went with the Avid is because they have that room correction built in. So
otherwise you have to use another system to be able to get somebody to come out.
Which, depending on what you have and how you do it, like that, you could do it. If you use the Grace 908, which are expensive, that monitor controller, it can handle that kind of thing. Even the speakers that I chose, they have software that comes with them that can do speaker delays. Not quite as precisely as the Matrix can, but like it can do, 1/10 of a millisecond delays, and some EQ too. So could you do it with your Apollo 16 and these speakers? Yes, you could. Absolutely you could. The Apollo just announced this week that they have the like natively they can support with the X16. They have Atmos basically built right in, so no room correction, but they have speaker delays and like monitor controlling for it. That's great. Nice. That's great. So it's getting cheaper and easier.
That's what
all
I was about to say.
Time.
This within the next few years, it's probably just going to be a standard. For most.
It's a higher barrier to entry than stereo. It is
definitely.
It's a lot more speakers. It's a lot more speakers.
And speaking of speakers, I know you're an Atom guy. So what you chose Atoms for your speakers?
Yes.
That was the kind of vibe that you went with. That why did you choose Atoms specifically? Is it just brand loyalty, or can this be done with? Can you get some KRKs and make it happen, or what type of speaker that you
absolutely you can. I went with Atom because I've been working on the A7Xs for. I mean, I started working on those when I was an intern with Yosh, like forever ago, right? So the A7Xs are what I was used to and loved, and why would I why would I change those? It was also important to me to have matching speakers all the way around. That's the ideal spec. You don't have to.
Yeah.
A lot of people have bigger LCR and then smaller channels around. A lot of people will use different brands around.
Yeah.
For me, it was important to keep all the crossovers the same, keep full range all the way around as much as possible.
Yeah.
And also, they're not huge speakers, so I didn't want smaller speakers in the rears, which are further away.
Yeah.
They need to be able to get the right amount of power to the listening position. So, so I used, my plan was to go with the A7Xs all the way around. And when I first started talking with Adam about that, because I have a good relationship with them, they said, actually, if you don't need those right this second, we have the A7Vs coming out soon.
Yeah.
So
I've been considering those myself.
I love them.
Yeah.
I think they're great. First of all, they have that software, so you can control them remotely with speaker delays and that kind of thing.
It's crazy.
That's huge in a especially a smaller Atmos rig. That's really beneficial. Yeah. That's a huge benefit. They also have some mounting points built right in on the bottom, which are nice.
Wow.
I'm not actually using those on these, but my original plan was to. And there's definitely some advantages there versus putting them on stands in terms of things getting bumped or whatever. Definitely. They're great. They're kind of the next generation of the A7X. And updated for a more modern studio and improvements where they can. They also have a rotatable tweeter, so my heights are all sideways, right? The height, they're not tall ways, they're sideways, and so we can flip the rotator and keep the high end dispersion the way it's supposed to be.
Makes sense.
Huge for a room like this where I need some horizontal and some vertical. Great.
Makes sense.
What could be better? So, I have been really enjoying these speakers.
Yeah, definitely.
I love them. I've been working on them for several months now. And
enjoying them.
I love them in stereo. I love them in Atmos. It's been a really good fit for me.
So with that process, okay, speakers. We'll talk about the expense of it, because that's I think if anything, as the Bible says, you got to count up the cost. And I know I butchered that scripture. There's a whole nother a part to that scripture that I just totally left out. We just cut through the fat and go count up the cost. What because I know this is probably, like you said, it's a higher barrier entry than stereo is, because anybody can go get a 2-channel Scarlett interface from Guitar Center for $59. But if you're trying to really be seriously building out an Atmos setup, what you can talk about your cost or however you want to talk, like what is that cost like? I mean, what is that really,
The two big things you got to think about are the speakers.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
because you have how many?
11.
11.
Yeah, this is a 714 room. So 7 around, 4 in the ceiling, and LFE channel. I have 2 subwoofers to manage LFE and bass management. But yeah, so that's, it's a lot of speakers. That's a lot of cost. Even if you get pretty cost-effective speakers, that's expensive.
That's expensive.
So that's probably the biggest factor. And the other factor is your interface. Like, how are you going to interface with the speakers to make them, to tune them correctly and to delay them correctly. And that's where I chose the Avid Matrix Studio, which is like a $5,000 box, kind of handles everything. That's insanely cheap for something that powerful.
It does what it needs.
But also, if you have the Apollo X16, like, you can do this. And I think that's the biggest thing I'd want to get across is, like, I don't know, a lot of people feel upset that it's expensive and like, oh, you're cutting out the little guy, and you're like, yes, it is a higher barrier to entry. It's still wildly cheaper than this was in the 80s. Wildly cheaper.
Even though it's a higher cost barrier to entry, it's also to couple with that, it's a higher like technical barrier to entry as well. It's higher cost. Time all across the board, learning the format, you know what I mean? Because I'm pretty sure you can speak to like what it's taken to like even learn, because you're going from using 2 speakers to using 11 and trying to figure that out and learn for that format. I'm pretty sure that's crazy. But so keeping with the cost though, so we don't divert too much from that, like what does that, like, what do you think? Okay, so if you don't mind, what is this setup kind of cost?
Great question. I don't know. I spend it all in stages, so I don't have a good answer for you.
Estimate it.
But the best way to estimate it is just like, okay, what speakers do I want to go with? Multiply that times 11 and get some subs. There you go. And and then find an interface. And that's really the biggest factor.
That's the biggest factor.
Yeah, you may need a more powerful computer. Maybe you're running it all on one system. There's a lot of processing that needs to happen. Immersive reverbs, if you're going to start doing that kind of thing, cost more. All of this stuff can be scaled though, right? Like you can start in headphones with no additional cost if you're in Logic, or an extra, I think it's $200 or $300 for the renderer if you're in Pro Tools. Like that's not a huge barrier to entry. It's okay, that's expensive. It's like a nice plugin not on sale at UAD, right? Like it's not okay, but but to get yourself into an entirely new format, and you can start, and okay, I would not recommend mixing in headphones, but you need to spend a lot of time in headphones anyway in Atmos. So what if you start in headphones and then rent someone's room? Right, and spend a day listening and listening and listening. The first time I did an Atmos mix, I did it in headphones here.
Really?
And then I went to another studio, which in Nashville that's easier than in a lot of places. I know. But I went to another studio, and I had a whole day booked out at the studio to mix one song that I already mixed, and I spent the whole day there playing with things, learning, listening to other records, listening, walking around the room, listening. Like, okay, so do that, right? That wasn't that expensive. And yes, Atmos rooms are still hard to come by, but they're somewhere, you know.
But you had to update your acoustics and stuff as well, didn't you?
I didn't do anything new to the acoustics other than a couple of modifications to make all the speakers fit.
I see like the cutouts I see for them and stuff.
Which is another reason I hired someone to do it, because he felt much more confident than I did in terms of like moving the cloud and adjusting it to make it work for the speakers, and just chopping out some cutouts of my panels and things like that. He's like, it's no big deal, I do it all the time. And he modified the what do you call it, the speaker cabinet to put a rig in so we could mount it sideways on the ceiling. Okay, cool. I didn't have to drill into my own speakers. I let someone else do that. That made me feel more comfortable.
Definitely.
And also, at this point in my career and my life, both are very busy right now, and I don't have time to be experimenting with trying to figure out how to get a speaker in exactly the right place on a ceiling. Like, I want someone who had done it before, can knock it out while I'm out doing something else, and add value while I can't. So so that was why I did the way I did it, and that makes it much more expensive. But you can start for free, or essentially free, and depending on your format, and you can build from there.
That makes
sense.
If
you hate it, okay, don't invest. Don't invest.
I think
if you're like, man, I want to spend $300,000, man, just call up PMC and spend all your money. Do it. Like, you can spend as much or as little as you want on this. And I think that the cost conversation needs to happen around like what your business actually does, what your clients actually need, and what your goals are with the future of Atmos, and what you believe about Atmos. Plenty of people don't think it's going to go anywhere. I disagree with them.
But you have a passion. Obviously, you put your money where your passion is. You have a passion for it. And you believe in the format.
Yes.
So you're not your investment and your drive is built around that, as opposed to looking at it as, it's a cash grab. I just need to do this because I need to be able to upsell or upcharge people. That's the wrong way to approach it. You know what I mean? You have to understand, learn the format, fall in love with the format, and believe in it ultimately. And then the investment, the cost barrier, all of those things seem to kind of be, I can do that. No, this is what I want to do. Because
this is 100% not a cash grab.
I know.
Every time I take an Atmos mix, I'm losing money.
Wow.
Not like, I'm making negative money, but I could be making more. If I was doing a stereo mix, I would be making more. Now, I'm working on trying to figure out how to change that. And the more I do this, the faster and more efficient I can get at it. And I don't have to second guess everything. And I don't have to work as hard to get it where it needs to be. So I can do it a little faster. But like, at this point, this has been a loss. For sure. Definitely. Between the investment in the room and the investment in myself and the investment in the mixing, time in mixing, like, I would be better off financially just doing stereo.
Wow.
But again, this comes down to belief in the future.
That's what I was about to say, yeah.
In 5 years, I want to be the guy that's very comfortable in this and has been doing this for 5 years, not the guy who's like, well, I guess I better get on board. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
no, I agree with
personally, that's where I'm at, and that's why I invested in the past year like I have. So,
but that's business, and anything you're doing, like it's all risk.
Yes.
You know, it's all risk for potential or future upside. You take the risk, you take the loss to get a win later. You know, and I think that's absolutely amazing, man. And I appreciate the insight on that, and I know the community does, because it's, like you said, it's still a relatively new format.
It is
that people are trying to figure out, like, should I get in the game? And maybe, I'm hoping that things that you shared about it tips them in that direction. Should I jump in? Should I jump out? Should I stay on the sidelines? Should I just keep doing what I'm doing and hire somebody on my squad that does Atmos mixes, and whenever I need Atmos, I just outsource to them. You know what I mean? And then that's a lower cost barrier to entry than that. You sell someone else's service. You just say, hey, I'm gonna hire Blass to be my Atmos engineer. So this is what Blass is gonna charge me for that Atmos, and I wrap it into my cost of what I'm charging the client, and it could be transparent to them. It could just be like, okay, hey, this is what it's going to cost for your stereo mix. If you're getting Atmos, this is an additional cost. If you're getting tuning, this is an additional cost. If you're getting this, is an additional cost. And we're wrapping it all in one. And then you're able, just like, I know I do that with mastering. I give the client a full tip cost that includes their mixing and their mastering, in their tuning and all of that stuff in that whole package. And so you can in turn do the same thing if you're trying to do Atmos, if you don't have the money or the time or the technical prowess to be able to try to figure out Atmos. You know what I mean? So I hope that's helped some people, in that. So last question I'll ask you about Atmos, or something you was gonna say about it?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing to me is like, serve your clients. If none of your clients are like, I need Atmos, and you don't really care about Atmos and you don't want it, like, okay, why are you getting the game?
Why are you pushing it?
Right. But if you keep getting inquiries about it, or you're like, I really believe in this, or you're thinking in that direction or want to, start educating yourself, right? Like, you don't have to go out right now and run a Guitar Center and buy a bunch of speakers. Like, start watching some webinars. Start listening to some things. Good. See if there's a room in your town that you can get into and be like, hey, can I just come listen to Apple Music for a little while? And just like, listen.
Wow.
Yeah.
So smart.
Yeah. Introduce me. So, I don't know. There are ways to start without diving. Don't throw your 401k at it.
There you go. No, please don't do that.
Yeah.
So last thing I'll ask you about Atmos in this particular space, and then we're going to look at some community questions. Is because this is different. I've heard some of the gospel Atmos mixes, and like I said, again, I'm still getting used to the format myself. Sure. But what I want to kind of dig into with that is, because we've heard the pop, R&B, ones that are top on the Apple Music charts right now, and you're listening. There's all this crazy stuff going on, and then now we're bringing this same format into the gospel world, which is more live instrumentation, more things like that. What is your experience been up to this point, bringing this format into the live gospel arena, where you're dealing with more analog instrumentation? I'm pretty sure like a live recording that's already got issues that go along with a live recording. Now you're trying to figure out how to put a live recording in Atmos, and that probably wasn't recorded with Atmos in mind. You know what I mean? I think me and Duncan was talking about that the other day. If you're, people that want to get in this format, he said you should start recording. When you're with that expectation already in mind. So when we get to the engineering stage, we know where to place stuff.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So if you can kind of speak to that a little bit, like what is that process kind of been like, you know, with taking something that was recorded initially thinking stereo, and now they say, oh, we want, or the label or whoever says we want it in Atmos, and how do you figure that out? How do you squeeze that in there?
That, I mean, first of all, that is the challenge.
Yeah.
And I think this, you know, when we talk about bad sounding Atmos mixes, that's part of this, is like the more you can plan for it, the better you can create it.
Yeah.
I just recently did a live recording on a label. If it's on a label these days, you're gonna do an Atmos mix. Like you're not getting playlisted on Apple without them. You're not getting, you know, you're not getting placements. You're not, you know, they need it.
Yeah.
Their labels are requiring it. You know, Sony and Universal at the top are saying we release them simultaneously now. So you have to have them. So I got a live recording with 2 audience mics. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, guys. Like most of the time, even in stereo, I like to have more than 2.
Yeah.
But you know, at least in stereo, you have 2, a left and a right. Okay, cool. Usually there's somebody with a tambourine or a whistle or somebody in one of the mics. But like you know, so how much better can we put this in a real space?
Yeah.
If you're recording a lot more channels than that.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
If we have height channels.
Yeah.
How are you trying to capture the room? Because that's what we're trying to recreate in here is a room. We're not mixing in 714. We're mixing in Atmos and monitoring in 714.
Yeah.
Right. So like we're recreating a space.
Yeah.
Which means you got to capture the space.
Wow.
And yeah, so there's, you know, there's tricks, there's up mixers, there's immersive verbs, there are, you can put stereo and mono verbs in the back, like you can do all kinds of things. And I did, and you can also pull things into the room off of the front wall, like even instruments and things like that. Like, that can be very effective. And also you kind of want the band to stay the band, and like, but you know, how much more realistic can it be if we have mics placed back there, and so you hear this woman screaming back over here, and this dude hollering over here, and this one behind you, and you hear a roof, right? Like, not that that's something we think about, right? When you're in a concert, you're not thinking about how high the ceilings are, but you hear it. So if we can capture that, if we have height channels and we can capture what the room was doing, then we have infinitely more possibilities in terms of how to make this sound good, realistic, real good. Like the fact that I do so many live recordings was one of the biggest things that I was like, Atmos is going to be big for this. Like this is tailor-made for Atmos. It's only tailor-made for Atmos if it's recorded with that in mind. So, and also there tends to be a lot of fixing and things in live recordings.
Already by default.
And that can be a real challenge when people are like, oh, I overdubbed that vocal when it was just me and the audience. Like, where do you want me to hide that? Like, you can't. So, and once you have a whole space, like it's not like you can just duck the entire room down because you decided you didn't want the loop in that section. Like you gotta plan ahead and you gotta actually have it be live for that to all really work all that well. So, there's always compromises. There are in stereo too. And we do what we can to make it feel both realistic, a little bit interesting, and utilize the technology to engage the audience. So
that's so good. So I think this is really good to speak to that, because like you said something that just unlocked the chamber in my brain, and I was just like, man, that's so true that you said that Atmos is really set up for this. This is where we can really win the game in the gospel, or live, recording space. But like you said, it has to be recorded from that. So this is even a space where, as if you're not a mix engineer, if you're just producing a record, if you're just, so this fits everybody. This piece of knowledge can help you, no matter where you fit on the spectrum, is planning. Because if we know that's where this is going, if we know that Apple is pushing it, Facebook, all of the companies, Spotify is going to eventually get on board, all of the labels are pushing it, playlists are pushing it, it's where it is, then it warrants us as producers, engineers, recording engineers, mixing engineers, mastering engineers, all across the board to start thinking about these terms at every stage, because it's going to make everybody's job easier at every stage.
And not just easier, better.
And better,
right?
yeah.
Like the with the live recording, everyone always wants to feel like they're there, right? That's kind of the idea of a live recording. Like you're trying to translate an experience that they have in church, at a concert, that kind of thing. Yeah. Translate that to your car, your headphones, to the people listening to the record. Yeah. What better way than to put them in the space? So it's not, to me, it's not even like, oh, make my job easier. It's no. Can't we make this better? Real? Like we can make this real. Wow. And I think that that's hugely important. And people already plan. Yeah. Right, when they're doing a production, they're planning for stereo. Yeah. They're doing a guitar and being like, I want one on the right and the left. We'll double it. They're doing, strings. They're picking stereo patches and playing strings, or they're, hiring real strings and recording a stereo set of rooms, that kind of thing. Okay, so all you got to do is kind of expand your horizons a little bit and say, we already plan for this. I need to plan it for where it's actually going to be heard, which is in Atmos now. So, So, okay, maybe we double the guitar still. Maybe we double the guitar, but then we want another, like, darker little guitar in the back, right? Like, maybe. Maybe we want a swell to come up behind us a little bit, like be spooky. Like, there's all kinds of, like, and again, this is really hard to do when you've never heard it. Exactly. And you don't know the format. And that was another huge room that I said, a huge reason why I said I need my own room. I don't want to be doing this in headphones and then going to another studio. Yeah. I need to be able to have a producer in here and play so a little bit. So they can hear it themselves. And listen and say, oh. So that the next production they can say, I know what this sounds like and I want to hear that. Yeah. So, that's so good. Yeah. So I think that's extreme value that I would love to hope the community really latches on to and understands. So you start, even if you're not doing a live recording, even if you're just doing a studio recording, you can still plan for these things. Get into a studio, like you said, listen to Atmos, go beyond just your AirPods, go beyond just that, get into a real space and listen to some Atmos mixes in that space so that you can be able to start familiarizing yourself with the format and being able to start thinking. And I said this on a podcast, I think recently when we was talking about why we should be getting into Atmos, like start planning for that, start understanding the format, start learning how to produce for the format, learning how, now when I'm thinking in the terms beyond produce, learning how to record for the format, learning where to place mics for the format. Like, and if you understand how an Atmos room works and how it's set up, that would help you to be able to start learning how to produce in that format. That's so good, man. So good. Thank you for your insight on that. I love talking about that stuff. Yeah, we're gonna talk about it in detail. Maybe we can even look at a mix here in a little bit, just to kind of see what it looks like and how that renderer and all that stuff kind of works. I think that would be really, really cool, and we can share that on a separate video. I'd love to. But okay, I want to dig in a little bit and get into some of our community questions that we have. And let's dig over here, because I like to put it out and ask the community, because people have questions that go beyond what my questions are. And it looks like even since I posted the question, we've got about 10 more questions, but we're going to curate this in a way that doesn't, because I'm pretty sure some of them are probably either we've already answered some of these things or they're just going to be redundant. Okay, let's see what we got. I think this will be interesting because this is a good question. It's from my man 100 Grand, as I call him, Delavanta Tabor. And Dale says, why do you love mixing gospel and not rock or something else? That's a great question. And I don't know that I would say I don't love mixing other genres. Yeah. I love mixing music, and good music and music that engages me. I am very fortunate to work with a lot of incredible music in gospel space, and that is a lot of my work. Things I love about gospel are the musicianship, because that's untouchable. Facts. Secondly is I think it fits my personal style of mixing. I'm not as generally as as inclined to be dirty. I like things clean and punchy, and that translates well in gospel. Not to say I don't love doing some rock music once in a while. I love working in pop music. I think that's a lot of fun. But the biggest thing for me is just like engage me. Some gospel music I love working on. Some I really don't. Right? That's just the truth.
Ebb and flow.
Which I would say the same is for any listener. Some you love and some you don't. But engage me, man. That's what I want. I want to open up that song and be like, ooh, that's cool. That's cool.
No
or that
feeling.
Hits my heart. Or like make me cry. Like I gotta listen to the song for hours. Like,
right.
Yeah, engage me.
Engage me. I love it.
That's the short answer is, it's
the feeling, the emotion that comes in.
I love good music.
Yeah.
And if that's gospel or non-gospel, great.
Love it, man. Love it. Okay, my man Joshua Humphrey, I hope I said his name right, says, if you're a beginner and you want to get into mixing, what's a good way to start learning? Software, equipment, tips, so on and so forth.
My biggest recommendation is just do it. Start doing it. And when you run into things that don't work, A, go a different direction, and B, start Googling stuff. But, and like find some relatively trusted sources. There's tons of bad info out there, but like, there's puremix.com, mixwiththemasters.com that do a ton of like videos, and some of those are more higher level and some are a little more basic. But there are plenty of, especially if you're just starting out, plenty of resources to, start trying things, seeing what works. So and in terms of software, it really depends on your, where you are. I use Pro Tools because it's kind of the industry standard for audio work. If you're like, well, I have Logic, okay, do that. If you have only GarageBand, well, start there then. When you run out of like room, if you can't do things because you're limited by your software, change your software. So
Love it. Okay, let's see. Man, it's not a question. I'm trying to curate these. It was a lot less last time I looked at these questions. Okay, here's one that I think is good. What is your approach to compression in general? And he says you can break it down by track type, Vox, drums, master, so on and so forth.
It totally depends on what I'm going for. Sometimes compression is just used for some general control. Sometimes it's used for some, heavy-handed aggression. Sometimes I love to use it in parallel, especially like on a lead vocal, to kind of bring that really forward and help get the detail out of the vocal. When it's in parallel, I'm generally smashing the snot out of it, but it's in parallel, so it's a different thing. We're still letting it through.
Do you have like a hard fast rule on like how much dB you get?
Oh no. Totally depends on what you're after. Generally on like a lead vocal, not in parallel, but on a lead vocal, I'm not doing a ton of compression per compressor. Sometimes I'll use a couple of compressors.
That's what I was gonna ask,
but a couple dB, 3 dB. I'm not trying to like. Generally, I'm not trying to make it sound compressed. I'm trying to make it sound forward, audible, close. So
it's like layers of compression almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and also, not overdoing that either. So I don't like things to be super compressed most of the time. Even on drums, I like a pretty open drum sound. Depends completely on the track. Sometimes I'm really crushing it in parallel. Sometimes I'm not using parallel at all. Sometimes I'm hitting kind of a drum bus compressor, a few dB. Sometimes I'm adding some distortion on that drum bus. Like sometimes I'm not doing any of that. So general rules when it applies to compression are hard for me. I don't know that
that was a loaded question.
It's a great question. I just wish I had a better answer. Honestly.
So I know the answer to this question, but I want to get it to the community, and they could probably look and see the answer to this question just in the room itself. But they said, is he mixing directly in the box, or are you using any outboard gear?
In the box.
totally in the box.
Totally in the box.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. Mix prep. What is your mix prep reverb? It says mix prep reverb approach to A to D, D to A routing.
I think those are a few different questions.
Those are if I'm reading, it's literally what he just typed. Mix prep reverb approach, reverb approach in A to D, D to A routing. So mix prep. Let's start with mix prep. What does that look like?
I put it in Jesse's folder on Dropbox. No,
pretty much
that mix prep is generally setting up the session in the way I'm accustomed to it, meaning the right colors, the right layout, like the order of the instruments, the way I'm used to. I import a template, so That's
what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Do you have a template that you use?
Yeah. There's no reason to recreate your routing every session. There's no reason to recreate your reverbs every session.
Say that, like, keep talking about that.
I think people, when they hear a template, they're like, oh, you just run it through your thing. No, it's not that at all, honestly. Like, I wish it was that.
Yeah.
Shoot, I'd be mixing a bunch of songs
100 records a day.
I wish it was that easy.
Automate it. Use AI. Just run it through the system and just throw it out.
But if you have an 8th note delay you like, you're probably going to use that kind of frequently.
Yeah.
And if the quarter note delay that you like doesn't work for this song, it's a whole lot faster to change that than to create it. Right? Like, okay, I'll change that delay a little bit or modify it rather than, oh, let me create a new aux track and a new send and label it. And like, no, it all just needs to be there for the most part. And mine's kind of minimal, honestly. I'm trying to expand it so I can do less of that because I find myself doing the same thing over and over again. Don't do the same thing over and over again. Work smarter than that, right?
Yeah.
Like keep your headspace where it needs to be, which is on the record.
There you go.
Not on putting the same, plugin that you always put on this thing on that thing. Start with that. If it doesn't work, kill it. You know what I mean? If you need to change it. But like start there.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Yeah, so that's what that is. A to D, D to A, I'm all in the box. So I'm using the Matrix Studio for getting out to the speakers, but other than that, I'm all in the box.
Yeah.
Reverb approach?
Yeah, how do you approach reverb?
Don't use it, it's awful.
Yeah. No reverb, dry, everything
no reverb. Dry. Reverb approach. Depends on the record, depends on the needs. I love a big reverb sometimes, and I love things to be dry, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like if you look at my sessions, there's not a ton of reverb on everything. Like, and even with the vocal, I'm always using pre-delay so that there's a dry vocal hitting you first. Like I want to generally, and this is obviously not applicable to every song, I want things to feel close, tight, punchy, and reverb is the antithesis of that. So I also don't want things to sound dry and flat, and so reverb can help create depth and help create natural feeling.
Yeah.
I was working on a song yesterday that I loved the kick, but it was too much. It was too. It was so good, but it was just
way too much.
It was too punchy.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? It was too punchy. And like I didn't use reverb. I used a sample, but like I layered underneath it a roomy kick drum sample.
Okay.
It's reverb. I just didn't actually use a reverb. I used a sample reverb. Yeah, exactly. But the effect was I'm trying to get a little bit of like poof on this because it needs to sit into the mix a little better.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It sounds amazing, but it's jarring. Yeah. Like it's not in the song, and so
that makes sense.
You know what I mean? I don't generally put reverb on kick drums, but sometimes it needs it. And this was not a song I would have thought, oh, I'm gonna need reverb on that kick. Like. It depends.
It depends.
So, yeah.
That's a good thing. that's a good.
That's unfortunately the answer to way too many questions.
I think it lines in. It lines in. And in that same vein, what is your? Because this goes from Linnell Andrews. She says, "What is your approach or your method for mixing vocals?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you typically go for with vocals?
Vocals are. A tough and time-consuming part of the process.
Yeah.
And
most songs, it is the process. It's all about the vocal, right? Music undergirds it, but that's what they're saying is the important thing.
The vocal sells the song, right?
Yeah.
And the vocal is the artist usually, and the vocal it's kind of the important thing, right?
Yeah.
So it gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
I'm usually doing some parallel compression on it, pretty heavy-handed parallel compression.
Yeah.
I generally try to keep it pretty clean in terms of not, you know, I don't know, I'm not using a lot of like distortion-y kinds of things or saturation-y kind of things. Sometimes, not always. You know, a lot of it is controlling frequencies, especially because we get a lot of very poorly recorded lead vocals. And that makes recording a lead vocal, or like mixing a lead vocal, really difficult. So controlling frequencies on a very very minute detail level, and then trying to fit it into the mix. Does it need to be bright? Do we need to actually roll some top end off because it's just everything else is bright? Like, how do we get it to sit into the instrumentation where it has its own space and can be free to stand? And then mute the choir so you can hear the lead vocals. Because that's the other trick, is that with gospel, you have a lead vocal and then you have a whole choir of lead vocal, right? Like, and they both need that space. And then you have a, you know, generally pretty important track that also has a lot of busyness to it. And I don't know if I mean that in a bad way. It's not simple, makes sense. Right? Like, there's licks and there's
it's complex.
It's complex. And so there's a lot of things fighting for that space and that frequency, and you can't just have everything be the bright important thing. So where do you place everything is kind of the trick. There's always a lot of automation on vocals.
That's what I was about to ask.
A lot of
automation.
Because it needs the detail.
You
got to be able to hear the little words. You got to be able to hear the big words. You got to be able to get through the music. You got to be able to, all of that stuff is just, there's a lot of automation, unfortunately.
A lot of automation. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so here's a good one, real good one. What is the biggest thing that you learned from your tenure with John Yosh? What is, like, if you could pick, it may be hard to pick one thing, or maybe it could be a myriad of things.
A whole list of things just went through my head. Like,
what are those lessons?
I'm nothing without John Yosh's stuff. So, like, I learned everything from like how he manages clients to how he, you know, manages sessions and hard drives, and everything was developed with him. So that's a very big question. And like, I owe Yosh a lot. But I think the biggest thing for me was learning musicality. And that's after going to school studying music, right? Like, how he hears what moves the song along, how he hears what engages and what's important and what's not is hugely important to me. You know, there's a huge aspect of like sitting with him and learning like what should a piano sound like? What should a kick drum sound like? All that kind of stuff. Sure. Yeah. And that's a huge aspect of it. It also changes on every song. But watching him over and over and over again fight to get the song to engage, to move, to not plod along, to whatever it needs to happen to it. I can't tell you how many times he's been like, you know, we get to this section and he'll be like, hey, can you bring there's times when he would be like listening and I would be at the computer and he's like, we need to write up the cymbals in this section. Because we got to this section, the drummer switched over to the ride. And there's no ride mic and we can't really hear it. And like the whole song just goes from to like
gone.
Where did it go? Where'd the movement go? And so like, learning that, like, that lesson of groove is amazing.
He's definitely in that.
That was probably one of the biggest things that I don't know how I would have ever learned without him, honestly. So
Wow.
He's a master.
Definitely the GOAT in that area. Okay. What are your favorite mix engineers? Who are outside of Yosh? We go to all. Who else outside of Yosh really kind of, you know, gets you moving, like makes you like be like, man, I love that. Who are you studying?
I mean, there's no like deep answer to this. Okay. It's like, I mean, when I listen to mixes that I love, it's generally in the top pop spaces. So that's Serban, that's Manny Marroquin, that's Josh Goodwin, and Jason Joshua. Yeah, like I love what those guys are doing. There's to me, those are not very translatable to where gospel is because it's a totally different production.
But you're bringing value from that. You're getting value from it.
Those are the mixes where I engage, and I'm like, man, that's really intriguing. How did they do that? Like, how do I integrate that into what I'm doing? How do I get that level of clarity into what I'm doing? All of that. So that's I'm typically studying the top pop guys.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking of top things, and this is probably another one that's probably in the same vein, but it might do. What are your let's just do top five favorite plugins.
Oh God. All right. Pro Q3.
Okay.
Fab filter. It's on every channel.
Wow. Okay.
It's my default
EQ
plugin. Yeah. Like that is what is used for most of any utility EQ. That's what I'm using.
Yeah.
I love that plugin.
Yeah. Love it too. Amazing.
Yeah. Let's see what else. The UA 1176 Blue Stripe.
The blue.
I love it.
Yeah.
And the Massive Passive.
Yeah.
Both on that.
Okay.
Let's see what else. A lot of my favorite plugins are just like, well, that solves a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, Soothe too.
Oh yeah. You put me on that. I think the last time I was here.
I will use that thing.
I was like, that thing is crazy.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. It's so useful in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So useful. So Soothe. How many is that? That's 4.
That's 4.
I need one more.
Well, give me one more. Couldn't live without it. If you open up if you walked into a studio, you didn't have your stuff, and you just needed to go buy something really quick to make sure I'm going to make this mix work. I need to have this at least if I just need to go buy it right now just so it's on this computer, or download it right now so it's on this computer.
I think I'd probably say Neutron.
Really?
3. Yeah.
Okay.
It's extremely versatile. So it's an EQ, it's dynamics, it's everything. So it's kind of a cheat in terms of like picking a plugin. But multi-band exciting distortion is really nice and useful. There's a couple of elements that I use on it. The transient shaper I use on it that I really like.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, that one came out of left field for me too, but
I
like it.
I forgot about Neutron.
Yeah.
I forgot about that plugin. That was I think I had the initial version of it when it came out. It's like a decade ago almost. I think when it came out.
It's come a long way.
And I haven't even looked. I know I didn't do 2, or they're at 3 now, right?
I'm on 3. I think that's the most recent.
Yeah. I haven't even looked at that. Sure. That is so good, man.
Yeah.
Let me see. I think we'll take one more. Let me see. Let me find one more in this C, because a lot of this actually is Dolby Atmos stuff. What is the advice? We'll close it out with this. What is the advice you would give to up and coming engineers? I just started mixing, or I've been in this a little bit and I'm trying to get better. What is those? Give me 3 pieces of advice that you would give to up and coming engineers.
Great question. I think the biggest piece of advice is just do it. Just keep doing it. That's how you're going to learn the best. It's just to keep doing it.
Yeah.
If you get in there and mix it and you're like, well, that sounds terrible. Try it again, right? Like, especially if you have time, like, pull all the faders down. Start over. Try it again. Try a completely different approach.
Yeah.
What if you did it with no compression this time? How does that work, right? Like, start learning what these tools do and how you're using them wrong. And like, because I guarantee you there's things we can learn, all of us are learning to do better, and that we wish we had learned a year ago. So so keep doing it. Second piece of advice I would say is listen a lot, like to things you love, to things in the genre where you happen to be working, but also to things outside the genre. Because growth comes from a diverse palette, I think.
Yeah.
And if all you ever do is listen to live gospel records,
Yeah.
like, how do you take that to the next level then? So, so keep listening to lots of things, forming opinions about what works and what doesn't, and what you like and what you don't, because all of this is personal, right? Like, none of what I'm doing here is just like, oh, well, this is how you do it. It's all, this is how I do it, because I like this.
That's good.
And this is what I think helps translate this song. So
that's good.
Yeah, you're paid for your taste. You're not paid for knowing how to click a mouse in Pro Tools.
That's good.
Anybody can do that.
That's good.
So develop taste. Something I'm still working on. Let's see, what else? That was 2.
Power. Close us out.
Close us out. Last thing would be ask questions, I think. Like, find other people who are doing this, peers.
Yeah.
And do it together.
Yeah.
I think that's another huge place where growth comes from, is not being isolated.
That's so
and
good.
Mixing is an isolating experience.
Yeah.
It's me and the dog in here 90% of the time. Right. So how do you grow? How do you know that you're doing something completely dumb if you've never seen anyone else do it differently? So talk to other people at your level, above your level, beneath your level. Sure. Like, talk to them and form some sort of community, because you'll grow together.
That's so good.
No secrets,
Yeah.
Bring
so
everyone
good.
up.
That's so good, man.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much. This has been probably, I think, top 3 interviews I've done, probably sitting in the number 1 slot. Thank you so much for your time, the information you share, your heart that you shared. I pray that it just saturates everybody's ears that's listened to it, like saturates them with some good tape saturation, just turn the saturation all the way up, and they really soak in all of the aspects of your career and your wisdom that you've gained over the course of working on many records. So make sure you guys check out Blass. If they need to follow you, how do they follow you? How do they connect with you? Maybe somebody that's just runs across this, they just want to hire you to mix. How do they do that? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, easiest thing is my website, jonblass.com, and
Easy.
Instagram is @JonBlass, and that's the only social media where I'm ever active at all. So,
there you go.
But on the Instagram or the website, there's links to email me, and we can certainly talk about doing a project together. So
Awesome.
I get DMs sometimes with questions, and I do my best to answer. And also, I don't always get to them, so sorry.
Yeah.
But I try.
Do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and some questions are just really difficult to answer, and I don't really have good answers. But I do like talking about this stuff, and I'm glad we had this opportunity. It's been fun.
Man, thank you so much. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening, if you're listening. And we will talk to you guys on the next one, where we will be hanging out with somebody else that's pretty cool, obviously. But we'll be doing that, and we'll talk to you guys later. We're out. Peace.